Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writers Chat, where we talk about all things writerly, for writers, about writers, just about anything you can think of. I'm Johnny Alexander. I'm joined today by almost everybody in our Writers Chat community that wanted to be on. Melissa Stroh is with us as one of my co-hosts, and Bethany Jett was with me with us as one of our co-hosts, but she has disappeared. I think she'll be back in a minute. And we're just glad to have everybody with us today. If you're watching the replay, I'm going to say up front, we often say it at the end, but if you're watching the replay, we invite you to join us every Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern. Also, you're invited to join our Writers Chat Facebook group and to like our Writers Chat page. So we'd just be really glad to have you with us all the time. Really great community. Today we're talking about our favorite books and books that really impacted us. Some of you will remember that a couple weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we talked about Robert Benson's book, Dancing on a Head of a Pin. And in there, he talks about having a bookshelf with his favorite books, and there's a lamp that is always on. So I just love that imagery. So he's got these favorite books that he reads year after year after year, and some of them it seems like he reads almost every day. But these are his favorite books by his favorite authors. Well, when I read that like several years ago, somehow I transformed it all in my head that it was only 6 books. Though when I reread it recently for Writers Chat, he doesn't give any limit of any number of books. But somehow I had made it 6, and I had put mine in a basket rather than on a bookshelf with a lamp always on it. So we've talked about the basket of 6 and what books would you put in your basket. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning, as at least everyone gets the opportunity to share at least one book in their basket. And we did say it could not be the Bible because as Christians, I think almost all of us would have said that. So it's not true for me because my Bible's not in my basket because it's in my tote bag to take to church every Sunday. And during the week, I read on my phone, the YouVersion plan. So, I didn't have it in my basket. And then someone said, my Bible. And I was like, oh gosh, now I sound like I'm not very spiritual, but you know what? That's okay. So, because I know I am. So, anyway, Bethany's not going to be with us for the whole time, so we're going to let her do one book first, and then if she's around and we get the chance, she can do a second book. Take it away.
I'll say the name of my second book. Bridge to Terabithia, which I read as a child, and I think it's one of the books that just sticks with you, and I love everything about it.
All right, I remember when you read that actually, because you cried and I read it too and cried and cried. Yeah.
I still think about that book.
Yeah.
Beautifully done. All right, but it was really hard to come down to just one book. I was really annoyed at this. But the book that I'm choosing is Fascinate?
Mm-hmm.
By Sally Hogshead, because I don't have the real book that I wanted to show, which was How the World Sees You by Sally Hogshead, which is the one I read prior to this one. They kind of build on each other. So it's a double whammy.
So now you've managed to mention 3 books already.
You like that? So How the World Sees You is really the book that I would have if I had a copy of it. I lend it to somebody, but it talks about basically your differentiator, and what makes you different is what makes you special, and that's what you need to capitalize on instead of trying to just be status quo. And then one of the things that she talks about was, if you think you're funny and no one else thinks you're funny, you're not funny. So you really have to pay attention to how you're perceived and how people see you, but then capitalize on those things. So it gave me permission to be more of those things of who I am instead of kind of hiding them or feeling like maybe it was weird or too much for some people. I just kind of think about, which advantage, which she goes into in Fascinate, is mine, and then living in it. Kind of like personalities, but on the opposite side.
That's great. Anything else you want to say about it?
I would recommend reading How the World Sees You. I want to read it again, and then take her Fascinate quiz, and then read Fascinate. That was the book that spurred me to actually go get my master's in the marketing, because I was just thinking about how I just wanted to know everything that she knew.
Right.
And then started reading Grit there's book 4 by Angela Duckworth, and in the middle of that book, there's when I went back and decided to go back. So, and it's in my Kindle. Take it away.
Take it away.
I'll stay in the chat. Thanks for letting me sneak in 3 extras.
You're welcome. Glad you were here. All right, who wants to go next? Melissa, Jan, or Dory, since you guys are on the screen? Anybody?
Well, I suppose if nobody's going to volunteer, I'll be brave.
Let's go to Melissa.
I will stumble through it, I can tell you, because it's kind of hard to encompass how a fictional book affects you in all things. It just peeks in every now and again in your writing and in your life. And so mine is Robin Hood, and this is the version by Howard Pyle, who was an author and illustrator in the late 1800s. And the book, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, was actually his first foray into writing children's literature. He wrote for magazines and illustrated for them as well before that. And he was actually accredited as a painter with coming up with the stereotypical style of pirates that we know today. Like if you think of the Errol Flynn movies or Pirates of the Caribbean, those styles were influenced by Howard Pyle's paintings. So was a very influential man in his time. And I actually had known, the tale of Robin Hood before I ever read his book. His book was kind of one of those diamond in the roughs that I never discovered until later on in life. It was always on my grandmother's bookshelf. As a child, I'd see it there with all the other children's books, but I would just kind of flip through it and look at some of the pen illustrations and then set it aside and never really read it, always going for the more colorful children's books as a kid. And then later on in life, after my grandfather had died and my grandmother was ready to move out of the house, we went to help her clean. And she was encouraging all of us to pick out the things that she had to get rid of that she couldn't keep but were special to us. And I knew about this one fairy tale book that I just had to find, and I was hunting for it and I couldn't find it. And then I came across Robin Hood and I thought, I really want to read that and see what it's all about. And I pulled it out and I was just swept away from page 1. It's filled with that whimsical romanticism of the time, and he kind of took all the Robin Hood tales and revised them to make them a little more child appropriate and just made them fun. And you fell in love with all the characters. He started out from the very beginning with Robin going into outlawry and then meeting all of the men in his band and all the adventures they had, and then you just get swept up in that. And then it takes you all the way to the end where the band dissolves during the Crusades, and then all up to Robin's death. And it just, you almost get teary-eyed every time you read through it because you just are so caught up in their life. And then it's all done and said. And I think it's a very effective example of literature for the time. And it just stuck with me, and it affected all my writing ever since. And if anybody ever gets around to reading my books and read Howard Pyle's, he might even find a few things that are very common. Little Easter eggs.
Melissa, what's your favorite Robin Hood adaptation, film, movie?
Oh, well, as a kid, I was always into the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves. That was the one that really stuck with me. But I was not a fan of Kevin Costner.
Oh.
So I liked it for all the other characters that were in the story. And I think we discussed this before on a previous open mic where we talked about our favorite characters and things like that. And in that one, the villain, Alan Rickman, and then Morgan Freeman's characters were some of the more dominant ones. And then I liked the Friar. I always liked the Friar Tuck.
Alan Rickman is, he's
was terrific. Yeah,
he's a terrific actor, and he played the Sheriff of Nottingham so well in that movie.
Yeah, he has a lot of one-liners that stick with you.
Boy, they do. He really, really does. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Norma.
My favorite, I've had this book for a long, long time, and it is an itty bitty little book. But it's really not a book, it's a devotional. and it's my utmost for his highest. Yeah. And all throughout the different stages of my life, it doesn't matter what I'm going through, I have lots of, I'm trying to find it. I just saw it. It just resonates with whatever's going on. I have lots of pages like this that are highlighted and underlined and starred. This was written a long, long time ago, I believe in the 1800s. I'm trying to look real quick. But it just, God just has used him to minister to a lot of people. And it's just, especially these of late, this has been a really good encouragement for me to read this and remember. Because sometimes all we have time for is a verse to read and a couple hundred words that expound or give a story about that verse. But God uses it to encourage us and feed us for that day. Because he knows we can't always get in the word and just stay there long enough to absorb all that's going on in the word, in the Bible. So sometimes this is the bread that I feast on, and it's a good one.
It's a very good one. I have a backup, but while we're talking about it, because it was my choice too. Oftentimes I read this not every year, but I've read it maybe 4 or 5 times. And I always pray that, God, I know that I'm not going to understand everything he's saying in these devotionals, because some of them are really hard and really dense and I just don't get it. But I just pray that the words just go into my heart and that, I am blessed by it and can bless others through it too.
Yeah. And it is written in some of the Old English.
Yeah.
So some of it it's not always something you can just skim over. It takes some, you got to put your thinking cap on.
Yeah.
But I like it. Anyway, so
I think
that's
his wife may have, after his death, put these all together. In fact, I read something about that, and I don't remember enough about what I read to say with authority, but I'm pretty sure that that's what happened. And in my copy, which I have had quite a while, I don't know whether you guys can see, but somebody scribbled all over this page. And I wrote a little note up at the top that says, Katie was here January 5th, 2012. So she would have been about 2 years old.
Sorry, Bethany, didn't mean to throw you under the bus.
No, it wasn't Bethany, it was Katie. Okay, who's next? Jan?
I can go. I have The Shack.
Okay.
I've read several times. I've used it as a Sunday school book. I have met him and heard him speak and got to talk to him and heard the background of the story and how it all came to be. And it's just fascinating. And I know the little girl dies in the book, but it's him, not, the editors wanted something that would really grab people and that they might be able to understand. But at one point he was suffering depression, and he was actually living in his car, and his wife asked him to write a story of his faith for his children. And so in between jobs, he had to ride a train. And so he would write a little bit each time he was on the train for his kids. And it all came together in this book, and how his faith grew through the process. He had a good faith anyway, but then how it grew through writing it and how many people he's reached with it. And there was 2 other men that were at the thing that have become a team that go around the country talking to people and sharing about the book. And the one, Dr. Baxter Kruger, wrote a sequel to The Shack, the Shack Revisited, and it goes into the theology of the shack and helps explain it. So it's like they're good to read together so that you understand better. And quite a moving story. I really enjoyed it.
Did you see the movie? I had not read the book nor seen the movie, but did you see the movie too?
Yeah, I've seen it a
What
couple of
did you-
times.
What did you think of, sometimes book better, movie better, or can you even compare with this?
They did a great job. It really, followed the book well. If you're not a reader, I recommend watching the movie, but I mean, the book does have more detail, but it's really good.
Okay, well,
I
great.
have another one if there's time at the end.
Okay, there may be. Okay, Elaine or Dory, do either one of you want to have a book to share?
I can share
Elaine?
mine.
Okay,
This is a very secular book. I mean, not very secular, but it's not a Christian book.
that's
But
okay.
I think I can say it's the first book that I fell in love with
Ah,
and read over and over as a child. It's also a book that, as an adult, I've read it to my grandkids. Well, before that, as an adult, I recorded it on a cassette years ago when my kids were little and gave it to them for Christmas so that they had the book and me recorded reading it to them. And I had to stop the cassette player at a couple of places because I was getting so choked up reading it, reliving it as a child, that I had to stop because I couldn't talk. And you're going to think that's crazy, but the book is The Boxcar Children. Anybody, the original Boxcar Children.
oh, wow.
And I love that book. I have looked and looked for, another copy of it. I did get this one finally. My mother-in-law saw it somewhere and she knew I loved the book. And so she got it for me back in '86, but it's a discard from a public library. I mean, from a school library. They don't put these books in the school libraries anymore, but I think it's the first book that maybe stole me away from reality into a world of fantasy. And I was going along with these 4 little children, sleeping in haystacks and digging of a dump site and living in a boxcar and surviving. And I don't know, it was just something fascinating about the book, but it's a favorite of mine, an old favorite. And then if I were to put, well, a current day book, I really had a hard time doing that, but I can say that my current day favorite author is Max Lucado. And it's because his writing is so, you can almost hear him speaking when you're reading his writing. And he has such a unique way of observing things, and he pulls the unexpected out of ordinary, sees things with a different light. And I just love that. So that's my 2 cents.
That was great. That's great. I think there are there boxcar movies? Have there been adaptations of those series? Okay.
I'm not sure. And
You've got some
are
people
there
saying
extra
that.
books? I mean, have they come out with is it a series?
Yeah, there's a
Oh,
series.
yeah.
Bethany
what
had them and read a lot of them when she was a kid. So yeah, there's
I just
some.
like the original. It was like from 1940, I think, 40,
Mhm.
42, 48. Let me
Mhm.
look.
Oh, and she says Bethany says in the chat that she has the movie. My mom got her started, I believe, on reading those, and she just loved them and had a whole stack of them.
Our library has a whole huge, they used to back when my kids were in school. I mean, this whole section on a bookshelf that was, series after series of Boxcar Children.
Yeah, there are.
1942 is the
Wow.
original.
Wow, and still favorites. That's really cool. That's
Yeah.
great. All right. Well, thank you. Dory, do you have a book to share?
I do.
Okay.
It's this book right here. It's called 1000 Gifts by Ann Voskamp. I don't know if any of you have ever read Ann Voskamp, but she has a very unique delivery in her writing. It's very unique, and I appreciate the freshness of her, just of her writing to start with. But not only that, I think the principles in this book probably changed my life. I would say maybe 5 years ago or so. I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's since 2012, and I went into a really deep depression, and just dealing with what that disease looks like and where it's going, and the inevitableness short of God's miracles in my life, you know. And it really took me out of ministry. That diagnosis did. It took me out of ministry. It isolated me, and I just pulled into myself. And this book, along with several other things, are what started to turn the tide in my life and really make me reach out and look outward again and share my experiences and be able to talk to people about my diagnosis. And this book started that, because the premise of this whole book is 1,000 gifts. Start a list of things that you're grateful for and build up to 1,000 things, which I never got to 1,000. But when you really look every day and you think, what am I grateful for in this moment? I'm grateful for the sun hitting my back right now, making me warm on my back. It feels good. I'm grateful for smiling faces today when my husband's at work and I haven't had any company this morning. And I'm grateful to see all your smiling faces. So when you really start to break it down, what am I grateful for in this moment? You really start to understand how God has blessed us so immensely and so enormously in our lives that you can't help but let it overflow and give it back out to someone else. So I would say that the whole principle of this book, you can't be depressed when you're being thankful. You can't be angry when you're being thankful. You can't be selfish when you're being thankful. You can't be isolated when you're being thankful. Thankfulness is this thing that overrides all of those other negative emotions, and all of Satan's traps are all overridden by this thing called thankfulness. And I think when you put it into play in your life and you really start to really live there every day, it takes away all of those things and starts to renew you from the inside out. So this is like the best book ever in the whole world. It's a devotional. And I actually buy this book and keep it on hand so I can give it away to people just as a gift, you know. So this is a wonderful, wonderful book. And this particular one is a devotional. There are 2 or 3 versions of it. This is the one that I like. So that's my book for today.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. You're right about Anne Style. I've read that book. It's been 2 or 3 years now, but she just has this poetic sensibility, but it's beyond even that. I mean, it is so uniquely her voice. It's amazing. It truly, truly is. Ben said he has a book. Ben, are you able to come on, or we'll just listen?
I think, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'll just explain it to you. It's a recent book written by a man that was born Amish. He turned, his family converted to Mennonite. And if you're familiar with the Amish area of Ohio, that's a high tourist area. I think Holmes County, Ohio is where he's from. His wife was a wife of great faith, and he was just kind of going along with it. Then his wife died of cancer, and he didn't know how to deal with it. He managed one of these smorgasbord all-you-can-eat places and did it for years. After his wife died, he had this desire to hike the Appalachian Trail. And so the Appalachian Trail was a challenge to him, and it's called Hiking Through. The author is Paul Stunsman. He's written a couple other books. They're not as good, but if you like the Pilgrim's Progress, this is a modern day, in my version, my idea, it's a modern day Pilgrim's Progress, because he starts in Georgia and hikes all the way up through Maine, and he tells about his own life journey of dealing with his wife's death, even to his conversion, to reconnection with Christ through that, through some tough times. But I find it so amazing how he's met so many different people and characters. One of the unique things is people don't use their real names when they're hiking through the Appalachian Trail. And so he came at it from a Christian standpoint. So if you don't give yourself a nickname, other people will, and that could be devastating. So he called himself the apostle throughout the whole thing. So he would write in the logs along the cabins and where you would check in. And he had somebody to send him food and packages along the way. But it's a really good story of how basically he dealt with his own loss of his wife. One little, without spoiling it all, one little tidbit was he met a man that was hiking the second time through because he got like within a quarter of a mile of hiking the entire distance and fell to his knees and couldn't finish it because he too was hiking the trail because his wife had died the previous year. And so he went back to do it all over again. And it normally takes about 5 to 6 months to hike the entire trail. But the book Hiking Through by Paul Stuntsman is just an amazing, character driven, and it's real life characters, and the way he writes is just pretty open, and there's a lot of funny things, a lot of serious things, and a lot of challenging things in the book.
Oh, I would like to read that. That sounds fascinating. How do you spell his last name? Is it just like Stunts Man? Like,
Stutzman.
okay.
He's written another book called Biking Through, and he bikes across the United States, but it's not like, it's kind of like those, you know, the first time you see a movie, the second sequel isn't as good as the, so.
Oh my gosh, well that sounds fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, if you guys don't mind putting your books and titles in the chat so that we can have that. And if you've got a link and want to add a link, feel free to do that too. Okay, well, I'm going to go back unless there's anyone else that I've missed in that's not on screen but in participating. Just let me know and do mine, and then we're going to have some time, so we may get to do a second round here for those of you who wanted to do more than one. So since Norma went with Utmost, I did have two because I'm like kind of like Bethany. It's like it's so hard to do just one. So my other one is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, and you can tell. I mean, this has been read a lot, probably 3 or 4 times. I had heard about Middle Earth and Tolkien and all that, kind of throughout my life, but it just excuse me, never appealed to me because it just seemed like I don't understand what these dwarfs and what's Middle Earth and is that in the middle of the earth or whatever, until the first movie came out. And I took my kids to see it, and we were just blown away. And immediately I had to read all the books. I couldn't wait and just watch the movies. I read all the books. I think I read The Hobbit about that time too, and just really loved it as well. I think I actually read it first and then went to the others. And then I wanted to read more. I mean, I really got wrapped up into this whole legendarium, Middle Earth and all of that. So I read The Silmarillion, and actually it is my favorite of all the stories. And it is the creation story, and it's about the elves in the first age. And I just think his creation story is fabulous. And of course it doesn't compare with God's creation story. And yet it is just fabulous the way he has these, what I guess the deity that were there at the time, seeing the creation and how it all comes about, and and just how the dwarves came to be. And it talks about death being the gift given to mortal men, and the elves not really quite understanding that, and how we sometimes think that if we could live forever, that would be great. And I'm not talking about living in eternity, but just living, and the elves end up seeing that that's, even though they have that gift, unless they die of broken hearts or in battle, they fade away. And I mean, it's just great. So if you're a fan at all or have never read The Silmarillion, I just truly recommend reading it. And this collection also has not just the Silmarillion, it has other legends and all that too, but just, he's just, I don't know, to be able to create such a magnificent world and languages. I mean, not just one language, but the elves, they have like 3 different languages. There's High Elvish, and and then there's the dwarf language, and or what are they called? The orcs, and the evil language of Sauron. I mean, it's just fabulous to think that one person could have come up with all these. And he would, in his writings, like, he would try out different things. I mean, so like, if you go through all of his writings, you might see like the Galadriel, she'll have one story, and then it might be a little bit different version or a different thing. It's like he was still trying to work out exactly what it was that happened, what really was her true canon or her life. So I don't know, it's just really great, and it's just a book that I'm drawn to read again and again and again. It's just beautifully, beautifully written, and the creation story is fabulous, the way he uses music to create the world. So that's mine. So anybody that I missed in the chat, that's, I want to make sure, like, if there's anybody participating that I didn't get, I want you to have a chance. So hop on really quick or let me know. Otherwise, who said that they had a second book? Jan does, and Norma does, and if Bethany, if you want to come back on and do a second book, Elaine's got a second one. So I'll just do Jan. I'm just going to do Jan, Norma, Elaine, and then we'll go from there and see where we are with time. Oh, Lisa. Okay. Jan, why don't you go ahead, Lisa? Then if you want to pop in and do yours right after Jan, because I want to give you a chance. I didn't realize you were here. Hi.
I just got here. I was watching the Sala finalist announcements.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
Anything we need to know?
Your daughter's a finalist.
Yay.
Yeah. And I lost focus when I heard about so many people.
Oh my gosh. So is Ben a finalist too? Because I heard him saying something. There was something. Okay, we're getting off track. We'll talk about sailing in a little bit. Jan, go ahead, then Lisa, and then we'll kind of go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. This is called Patmos. It's by the Dr. Baxter Kruger that I mentioned earlier. It's his story. A man is struggling and ends up back in time and meets John on the island of Patmos. And they're going through what John wrote in the Bible, and then they're in Revelations, and John's taking him different places and helping him work through his struggles. So I've read it once, but I am going to go back and read it more because there's so much in it. It's really good. Thank you.
That sounds really, really good. Okay, Lisa. You're muted. We need you to unmute.
Left behind. And Jerry was kind enough to sign this guy for me.
Oh, so, wow.
It is because, I think I read it every year. It's because the Lord used Left Behind to draw me to him. So I became a writer because God used a writer to reach me. And yeah, I mean, there's an agenda in here, even though it's fiction, but oh my goodness, what a great agenda, right? So he became my first mentor. And he signed this, and then he put Luke 1:45. Interesting, because it says, "Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her." Isn't that wonderful? Guess I should have looked that up before. Anyway, that's one of my pillars. That is definitely number one in my basket of 6.
Oh, that's great. And I love that personal connection too. That, that it's signed. That's really cool. And it's why you became a writer. So what do you think of the movie adaptations?
Actually, I didn't like the new one with Nicolas Cage. It was too, what's the word? They relied more on the special effects than they did on
Okay.
anything. I actually like the first ones better. As cheesy as everyone thinks so many of them are, I think that stayed truer to the focus of the book. I would love to see it remade really, really well.
Yeah, just done
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Me too.
All right. Okay. Well, make sure you put that in the chat too, because you may not have been on earlier. They were. We want all the books in the chat. Okay. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks for coming on, Norma.
Well, I have it on my Kindle, so I don't know if you can see it. Frank Peretti.
Oh, yeah.
I have read this book. I couldn't tell you how many times. The first time somebody suggested it to me was back in the 80s, just so you know, or maybe early 90s, but anyway, around there. And I put it down. I couldn't get through the first 4 chapters. I was like, this is insane. And somebody said, if you'll get through the first 4 chapters, you'll like it. He is so detailed in laying the groundwork for what's coming. And you think it's, why do I need all this? But then when everything's happening, you're glad you had all that information. And so I just love, I've read pretty much everything Frank Peretti's written. I was very jealous, was it last year, 2 years ago, a writer friend of mine was going to the American Christian Writers Conference, American Christian Fiction, however that goes.
Yeah.
Anyway, she was flying from Texas to New York, and she was sitting beside a gentleman on the plane, and he says, well, what do you do? And she says, well, I'm a writer. And he goes, me too. And it was Frank Peretti. So anyway, my kids and I were super jealous because we were just big Frank Peretti fans, and he's done some stuff for what he calls tweeners, which is that 10 to 12-ish. They're not quite teenagers yet. And so we're just big Frank Peretti fans. And I think it's, even though it's all fictional, I think there's a little bit of truth that you can take away, in that we're in a spiritual battle every day.
Yeah.
And we often don't realize how much God and his host of angels have protected us from things that could be devastating, or has allowed things to strengthen us or whatever. So even though it's fictional, there's nuggets you can take away from it for real life. So that's my number 2.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Elaine, did you have another one?
I do. It's a favorite. It's written as in little snippets. It's written not as a devotional per se, but it could be used as a devotional. You don't have to read from page 1 to page whatever. You can just pick it up and read a couple to encourage you. But it's Leadership Lessons of Jesus. Have you ever heard that? By Bob Briner and Ray Pritchard. I got to know him, actually. Bob Briner, I think he was on the board at the college I went to in McPherson, Central Christian College, and where I worked for several years too. He may have been a graduate of there. It was just a junior college back when I went forever ago, and he's probably a little bit older than me. But it's written in each little chapter. They're very short. Like I said, they can be used as devotionals, but in each one, he has scripture, and he's teaching of what we can learn about leadership. And he's a very successful man through looking at how Jesus used leadership in his various roles. So it's a really good book. How to Handle Opposition is one chapter. Boldness builds leadership. Just good stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Dory, did you say you had a second one too? You're muted.
Oh, good. There we go. I do, but before I do that, I wanted to just read about 4 lines from Ann Voskamp to just give you a feel for what her voice sounds like. She writes on Surprising Grace, the field of beans west of the barn, it looked gaunt come October, bean pods all hanging like bony ribs. Whenever the wind sighed, the whole field just rattled skinny. That's how my dad always spoke of a railish man, that you could count his ribs. Nothing in me wanted to count those beans, know the yield from that spare field. She's just very fresh. I just really enjoy. So that's just an idea. Her whole book is like that. So, but to the second book though, The Poetry of Robert Frost, the complete works of Robert Frost.
I have that book too.
I love Robert Frost. I mean, when I write poetry, poetry pours out of me sometimes, and I don't think it's very good. Half the time it's just because it has to come out. But I can open up Robert Frost and say, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what a good poem looks like. You know, he expresses himself. He also has a very fresh and very different voice if you read all of his poetry. So I just thoroughly enjoy just looking at this when I'm trying to write poetry. And it reminds me I don't have to say everything in my poem. You know, things need to be left unsaid. And he does such a good job of that.
What's the exact name of the book? Is it The Complete Poetry of Robert Frost?
The Poetry of Robert Frost, the collected poems, complete and unabridged, edited by Edward Connery Latham.
Okay. I took a class, and I'm pretty sure it's that book that I had on Robert Frost when I was in grad school, and it was just, it was just really great. It was a shorter class, and we had to memorize a poem, and I memorized The Two Tramps, and it actually, one of the lines is something about my avocation becoming my vocation, and it just was really, really a cool poem. And then the professor, for each of us, he put whatever poem we memorized, he put it on a piece of paper, and he had these stamps they got from the post office, of Robert Frost's picture, and he put those on there too and gave them to us. So mine's framed and hanging on the wall right over there.
That's
I mean,
nice.
it's really cool. Yeah, it's a really cool thing, cool keepsake. So
Well, he wrote Two Roads Diverged in a Yellow Wood, and Sorry I Could Not Be One Traveler, and I just looked down one as far as I could to Where It Bit in the Undergrowth. That's Robert Frost, probably his most famous work.
Yeah.
Traveled.
It is. Melissa, do you have a second one?
Oh, yeah.
I called on her unexpectedly.
I was sitting there thinking, well, where the closest one I can reach would be
Melissa's stretch.
Bodie Taney's Only the River Runs Free.
Okay.
And this one was one that inspired me when I first started out writing my Tale of the Clans series. I have a very strong bias for Bodie Taney books. I adore her writing. Her characters are so vivid and real.
Mm-hmm.
And I also happen to like her because she's a big John Wayne fan, and I agree with her and her husband. The Quiet Man was the best John Wayne movie ever. And you can see that affected her writing in here, because like her, she has a character who is very much like Maureen O'Hara. And I had one too as my little homage to Maureen. But her characters are so real. It's like she places you in Ireland during the potato famine, the Great Hunger as it was known. And the characters are just so vivid. And there's one scene in there that I go back to and study time and again. It's a pub scene where they're kind of talking a little treason among each other. And you picture the lighting, you picture the air, the smells, the food that they're eating. Everything is just so real. And I go back and I study that scene over and over, and I try to evoke that, because I feel that description is one of the areas where I struggle with the most, and being able to create a scene that vivid and characters that you just are invested in that much. It's just an awesome book, and the series is really good too. It's the first book in an entire series, and I have the whole series yet. I should revisit it sometime in the future.
Oh, that's great. That's great. All right. Well, we've gone through a lot of books. So if you didn't have any books on your to be read nightstand, here are a bunch that you could choose from. So again, if you've not put books in the chat, please do so. Other books have been mentioned that we didn't do on air, and it's really great to have all of these choices. Bethany, this is your last chance to come back on and do one more book. I'm going to give you like a 5 count here. And while she's doing, well, I kind of wanted her to do that anyway. Is she still is she still on?
Mm-mm.
Is she gone?
Yeah.
Oh, so I'm just talking to air. That's the way it is with kids, right?
They're there 1 minute, next minute you're talking to the wall.
Just talking to the wall. Okay, well, I wanted her to talk about next week, so I will do my best. Andy Clapp is going to be with us. He is a minister at the church in North Carolina, where they're actually holding the Carolina Christian Writers Conference this weekend. And he's going to be talking about writing for pastors, so that's going to, be a really interesting topic that we've not done before. So Andy is just a super, super great guy, and just really looking forward to having him with us next week.
She's back.
Bethany.
Yeah.
Do you have one more book?
Oh, I do.
Okay, I'm going to give you a chance to do one more book, and then anything before you do that, anything else you want to say about Andy being on next week? Because I don't know that I did him justice.
Yes. All right.
Andy is phenomenal, by the way.
Yeah, he
I've
is.
been fortunate enough to go to the North Carolina conference the last 2 years, and he's just amazing, not only as a writer, as a pastor, and as a host. They're just amazing.
He is. He's a really sweet guy. All right.
Yeah. They are amazing. Okay, I guess Andy he's got a lot of great things that are happening right now. Like, I don't know what he's publicized book-wise, but really great writer, and I'm excited to have him on. I didn't know what you said about him, so I didn't want to just repeat it.
I just said he was a minister at the church, but I didn't remember the name of the church, so.
Yeah, it's Mount Zion Baptist Church, and it's been in Liberty, yeah, and it's a privilege, honestly, to work with him and his congregation. Like, they love him so much, and they just pour out to all of Serious Writer. Like, when you get there, like, you feel like a family, because that church is a family, and then they bestow that on you. So anyone who's ever been to that conference, that's how you walk away feeling. They're incredible, and he's amazing, and you're gonna love him. So
that's great. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, one more book.
One more book.
Okay. You Are a Brand by Catherine Caputa. She's a personal branding strategist. I had to read this for one of my classes. It is the only book that I did this to. Like, I just got notes on all these pages. It is an amazing book. And I think for authors, especially because we are kind of brands, and our product is books instead of like something else, this is super, super good. Here's books. This is it. It's the second edition. And then she's also got a book called Breakthrough Branding and Women Who Brand, which I've not read, but I want to. It just goes step by step. She makes you feel like you're winning with small things. And she kind of like breaks it down, even things like, what's your unique selling proposition as a brand, what makes you different, kind of going along with Sally Hogshead, and you'll love it.
All right. Okay, great. Elaine, did you have another book before we close up? Okay.
Nope.
I just wanted to make sure I got everybody. So thank you for all of you who shared your books, and all of you who put book titles in the chat, even if we didn't talk about them on air. And again, if you're watching the replay, we're really glad to have you with us and invite you to join us anytime that you can in person. It's always a lot of fun to be here, and then you get to be part of the after party too, which is also a lot of fun. So next week we'll be back with Andy Clapp, and just, hope you all have a great, great week, and go write. See you next time. Bye-bye.